As always, welcome to Vince. Great to have you with us today. Brought to you by Blackout Coffee, the official coffee of all of us here at Silverlock. Go to blackoutcoffee.com/Vince. Use the code Vince, that's VINCE, for 20% off your first order. Appreciate you being here today. We've got a huge show for you. We've got Dan Bongino and Kash Patel sitting down for their first interview together to talk about what's happening within the FBI, what they're digging up, and what you can expect to see in the weeks and months ahead. A lot to get to there. Also, now we get the breaking news this weekend that Joe Biden has an aggressive form of cancer. How much of this information was kept from you? We'll dive into all of the details, what we know, and all of the questions we still have about this. The biggest scandal in American history. Really worth digging in here. And then we've got some other information coming up. We've got Mike McCormick will be here with us. He at one point, he's an amazing American. At one point, he was the stenographer for Joe Biden. His job was to write down every single syllable that came out of that guy's mouth back when he was vice president of the United States. We get Mike's reaction to all of this breaking news and what he thinks it really means. It is a big Monday. Great to have you with us here. Coming up on the show, it's going to be so good. I got to thank our sponsors today. Millions of veterans and active military have risked and continue to risk their lives for you and I to live a life with freedom. You know, the irony is that our country is becoming less and less free by the day. Our phones, they're listening to us. Tech companies, they're tracking all of our online activity to sell it for profit. One of the best weapons that I use to protect myself is a product called ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN is an app that sends 100% of my online activity through secure, encrypted servers. That means nobody can see what websites you visit or what apps you use. It's none of their business. With ExpressVPN, none of your online activity is logged. Within the last year, ExpressVPN received over 400,000 data requests, and 0 ExpressVPN customers had their data shared by the company. And that's because there's a strict zero logs policy. ExpressVPN is easy to use. It just takes one click, and it works on all of your devices. And right now, you can get an extra 4 months for free when you use my special link. Go to expressvpn.com/Vince and get 4 extra months of ExpressVPN. That's EXPRESS VPN.com/Vince. Well, that was neat. We got to see Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, in Dan's case, for the first time on a television camera since he's been the deputy director of the FBI. They sat down going into the weekend. Of course, they had pre-recorded it last week, which is why we were able to see a teaser clip on Friday, going into the weekend, and then they aired it on Maria Bartiromo's Sunday program. So just to place yourself in time, the interview was done before James Comey was putting shell art together to call for a threat against the president of the United States on a beach. So that's where they were. But fascinating to see these guys together, and I liked what I heard, and I was curious about a bunch of things that I heard. Let me start with Kash Patel and Dan Bongino saying that new January 6th documents are going to be coming out over the course of the next few weeks. Cut 7, here are the two men discussing this.
What was the FBI doing? Well, we got answers coming. We just found a trove of information, and it's on its way to Capitol Hill right now. And they've asked, and they're getting them, and you're getting answers on January 6th. You're getting answers on what sourcing was utilized, what money was utilized, how many assets were utilized, who made those decisions. You're getting it. We can only control the FBI, but you're getting it from the FBI.
Were there FBI agents undercover egging people on?
Like I said, that answer is coming, and it's on its way to Congress.
You're about to, I saw it. I saw the portfolio of information. We dug far and wide to find it, and I'm pretty sure now we have a conclusive, definitive answer, but you and the public are going to have it. You're going to see it in writing over to Capitol Hill.
You're getting the information. It's coming. It's being first sent to Congress. Remember, these congressional committees keep asking for information from the FBI, And Kash Patel and Dan Bongino are delivering it at a breakneck speed. So week after week, they're sending more info over to Congress. And then, of course, it goes public as soon as it arrives in Congress. These details, if I'm reading between the lines here, as we listen to these two men talk about this, Dan went out of his way to say that there's a distinction between an agent, as in an undercover FBI agent, and a source, a confidential human source that is working with the FBI. And he wants people to remember that as this information comes out, that there is a difference between those two categories of people. So keep that in mind when we get whatever information emerges. The core question remains, and I hope these documents illuminate the answer to this, is to what extent was the FBI placing pressure on any of the people that it controlled inside of that building in order to both raid the building and to induce the chaos that we saw in the events of January 6th? How much of this was just astroturfed by the FBI? Those are the critical questions. And these guys are saying, look, we've pulled all these documents together, and now we're releasing them to Congress, which means they're being released to you. So we've got that transparency to look forward to coming over the next few weeks. Also, they were asked about the promotion of a guy called Steve Jensen to the Washington field office of the FBI. Jensen has been believed to be one of the signature bad guys in the FBI drama, the FBI scandal, the tyranny against the American people, the attacks on Americans. And so it's left a lot of conservatives scratching their heads. Why was Steve Jensen elevated to this important role in the Washington field office, this very important field office of the FBI? Luckily, I'm glad Maria asked about this. Here's what the fellas had to say, cut 8, on the promotion of Steve Jensen.
You promoted Stephen Jensen, the architect of the FBI's overzealous January 6th investigation.
I want the American public to realize what we did. That man was in a position where he literally fought back against the machine who was saying, we want to politicize this event. We want to politicize this event. And at the end of the day, remember, Maria, there's a chain of command here. So you can fight back your chain of command to a certain degree before they fire you. And Steve Jensen and other folks were promoted because they embody what the American public demands of FBI agents.
To get to the bottom of something like January 6th and the pipe bomber case, for example, you need 3 things. You need people, you need information, and you need people with information. I'll allow the public to put that together and just wait, and you'll see. Nothing we're doing, nothing is by accident.
Okay. That is one of the most important clips you're going to see from this entire interview. One of the most important. And those two men just said, they each said something that I think you and I should spend some time mulling over. First, Kash Patel says that in Steve Jensen's case, he did everything he could to fight back against the system, but in the end, he has to do what he's told by his superiors, is what Kash is explaining. Now, what that means to me, I'm sussing this out. I'm listening to this, and I'm thinking deeply about it. What that means to me is that Steve Jensen is useful in going after senior officials who abused their power and broke the law. That Steve Jensen is an important ingredient to that. Now, Kash characterized him as a decent person, saying that he was resistant to these efforts to be tyrannical and in the meantime protected his job. I'll have to take Kash at his word. I don't know Steve Jensen. But I do know what I just heard suggests that they're not looking at Steve as the guy to take down. They're looking at people who were above him, people who were issuing orders, people who were abusing their power at a very high level. So Steve Jensen is a means to that end. Part 2, what did you hear Dan say? He said, in order to do this, you need people, you need information, and you need people with information. Which category do you think Steve Jensen fits into? Which category does he fit into? He's people with information. He was at the epicenter of this tyranny against the American people. He has access to the information about how all of it went down. So, again, I'm merely engaging in some educated speculation here. But why can't we view a guy like Steve Jensen as someone who they were able to now use against the evildoers? To what extent is that possible? I think it's very possible. In fact, again, I remain pleased that we get Kash Patel and Dan Bongino at the top of the FBI. That's super important. But I think that the audio you just heard, you even heard Dan say it, I'll let the public make what they will of that, he said at the end of that clip. What that means is for you and I to look at this and go, okay, why would this make sense? Why would Steve Jensen be in this role? And the answer is he's a guy with information, and there are people who were senior to him that we want to take down. That's what the answer was that you just heard from Kash and Dan. A valuable answer there. So interesting to hear that. Again, this all makes sense in the service of actual consequences. So we await the meaningful consequences for the guys who waged this tyranny against the public. But insofar as we're trying to stitch together what do we get in the interim, that's a useful piece of information from those two guys. Here's more on the quest for accountability. Cut 9. Here is Kash Patel, Dan Bongino talking about Russiagate information. Take a look here.
Now is continue to put out the documents and the information that these people withheld from the American public. And I'm just telling you right now, as much as we know about Crossfire Hurricane, he and I just found out more last week. And we're continuing to work with Congress to put those documents out. That's how vindictive and vicious the former leadership structure here was. Not only did they bastardize the FISA process and lie to the American public, they withheld and hid documentation and put it in rooms where people weren't supposed to look. And it's a good thing we're here now to clean it up, and you're about to see a wave of transparency.
What do you mean?
Just give us about a week or two.
About a week or two. Brand new Russiagate information set to come out in the midst of all of this. Now, I should point out something that Devin Nunes, the former congressman, was on with Maria Bartiromo immediately after this interview and was talking about that component of it because he was steeped in it. He was digging up all of this Russiagate garbage when he was in Congress with Kash Patel, by the way. And imagine Kash, who's probably the single most versed person on all of this, finding out new information inside of the FBI that they're now releasing to Congress. Devin Nunes seemed to be hinting, or at least, again, educated guessing over and over, that this could have something to do with the Mueller investigation, that the data that they may have discovered may have something to do with Mueller. Now, we'll see. That's a dog-ear that. See if that is what actually comes out. But he believes, that is Devin Nunes, and I'm talking to him on the Nationwide radio show today from 12 to 3 Eastern time, so I'll get into this a little more. He believes that it was Mueller's team, and that's a guy like Andrew Weissman, you know that guy. That guy's at the center of so much garbage against President Trump, the weaponization of government, that they may be exposed here by the documents that are going to be released. And you heard Kash just say it. Whoever was handling all of these documents, this Russiagate stuff, they were hiding these documents. They were trying to conceal them even within the agency in order to prevent them from ever being publicly disclosed. So, again, more transparency is on the way. Now, on that particular topic, Russiagate, Maria Bartiromo did push back at one point and go, wait a second, we talk about all this, but we've been talking about this story for years and we haven't seen meaningful accountability for it. And Kash had a good answer to this. Kash laid out, he's like, look, we're dealing with what we can now. And the reason that we can't place everybody under arrest for the events of the 2016 election is because some of these things, the statute of limitations has completely run. He says it's 5 years of statute of limitations in a lot of these cases. So we are dealing with what we can deal with now. So an update on that story as well. Why did the FBI's leaders imperil the agency's reputation in terms of going after Trump in this way, tyrannically, Maria Bartiromo asked. And Dan Bongino had an answer. Take a look at cut 10 here.
Why put the FBI and its reputation at risk? What, it was just to win an election? Why?
Because they're weak. Because they're weak. I hate weak people. I can't stand it. They didn't have... we're on TV, so I already said BS once. But they didn't have the guts, the courage, or the character to do the right thing. They did the easy thing. Donald Trump became a convenient political football they used, they thought they could leverage. They thought they thought with the media on their side that they'd get away with it.
They thought they'd get away with it. They thought they'd get away with it. And they would have had President Trump's voters not rallied to his side, not gotten him across the finish line, not made it, in the case of the 2024 election, too big to rig. They would have. Just imagine if Hillary had won the 2016 election. There would be no rearward-looking effort to get to the bottom of any of this. Any of it. It would have all disappeared. There would have never been this kind of transparency that ensued only because President Trump became president not once but now twice. That's it. And Dan's answer is well-founded because they're weak. Because they didn't have the strength to stand up on principle and say, no, you can't do this. No, you can't violate the constitutional rights of American citizens. No, you can't rig the election. You're not allowed to do that. No. They folded. They're weak people. Weak people. They folded. And they unleashed the biggest scandal in politics of our lifetimes. It's amazing. And just imagine being Dan and Kash and finding out all this, finding out new information now about all of this. Also, Dan emphasized what the actual role of the FBI is supposed to be, which is to go after violent criminals. Here's Dan talking about the hunt for child predators, cut 11. Take a look.
You said if you're hurting a child, taking away a child's innocence, we're coming for you.
Yeah, with that knock at the door, it's not Amazon. That's going to be us. This is a huge job. And Maria, not only does it destroy innocence, I said to everyone in the room, say week 2 or 3, when Kash and I put Restoring Justice together to go get these mutts off the street, these kiddie pornographers and these animals, right? I said to everyone in the room, I said, you know why it's going to matter to America? Because everyone in the room is a child or a parent, right? There's no immaculate conceptions here, right? I love Jesus, but there's no one in the room, right? I said, this matters. And not only that, it creates generational crime because abused kids then become abusers in a lot of these cases. I said, we have a chance right now. I said, we got to go make their lives painful, these bad guys. And we went and we locked up in a month, 400? We saved 115 kids. And you haven't even seen the beginning because those 400, a lot of them are talking. And when you log onto that network next, you have no idea what we're doing. You think you're safe in your dark web? I promise you are absolutely not safe. You have no idea what we can do.
You know, this gets to something that you've heard Dan say for years. The do matters. The do matters. His thing, the thing that he reiterated in the interview, the thing that he reiterated on social media is like, look, I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm just asking you to watch. I'm just asking you to watch, see what happens. And here you are watching as hundreds of child predators are being rounded up all across the country, arrested, including some deeply, deeply demonic organizations who prey upon children, now being picked up by the FBI, arrested, taken off the streets. That's a huge deal. That's a huge deal. If you're the kind of person who's looked at the Jeffrey Epstein saga and thought, man, I really want people to face consequences for hurting children, well, where do you place arresting actual pedophiles and child predators on your list? It should be right there at the top. That's what you want. You want accountability. You want consequences for people who hurt the innocent. So good to see that. Now, on Epstein, this is the clip that a lot of people are chatting about this weekend. Kash and Dan both maintain now that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself in that jail cell in Manhattan. Take a look. Here is cut 12, Kash and Dan talking about Jeffrey Epstein.
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to? I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
So what do you do with that information? Those guys, when those guys say that, what do you do with that? Now, is the answer that, oh, they've been bought off by the deep state, that they're a part of it now? It's a scam. They're trying to scam you. No, that's not the conclusion I walk away from that with at all. I walk away believing that both of those men believe that Jeffrey Epstein took his life. Dan Bongino is an honest broker. Kash Patel is an honest broker. They're all in, these guys. They both sincerely believe that. Now, does that satisfy my curiosity about the end, the demise of Jeffrey Epstein? No, it doesn't, actually, in the end. It doesn't satisfy me because this is a story of such epic proportions and so consequential that what I would like to see is every single document that is making those guys that certain. I would encourage the Trump administration to release all of the documents that have led to the conclusions you just heard Kash and Dan vocalize. Again, guys that I trust. But it is possible for different honest people to look at the same information and walk away with different conclusions. Remember, forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden, working on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein's brother, is thoroughly convinced that the way Epstein's body was left was evidence of an external strangulation, that somebody had strangled him in that jail cell. There's too many converging mysterious events to simply walk away from it and just merely accept, at least from our public standpoint, the idea that the guy committed suicide in Manhattan. Just too much. The cameras go down. The guards falsify the records. Nobody does the rounds. He's left unattended. It's just too much. So you can see why we're skeptical. You can see. And so I'm asking for more public disclosure about the underlying documents. I'm not saying Kash and Dan are wrong. I'm just saying I'd like to have the same amount of confidence that they seem to have right now. Fascinating stuff. All right. In a moment, I want to go over what's going on with Joe Biden right now, a big cancer diagnosis. And then we will welcome our guest in here in just a few minutes. Looking forward to that. Before we get there, I want to thank our sponsors. Delete Me makes it so easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. It's easier than ever to find personal information about people online. Having your address, phone number, and family members' names hanging out on the internet can have actual consequences in the real world and makes everybody vulnerable. With Delete Me, you can protect your personal privacy or the privacy of your business from doxing attacks before sensitive information can be exploited. Take back control of your information. You really should. It's yours. Why is anybody else just putting it all over the place? Take control of your data. Keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me, now at a special discount for our listeners. Today, get 20% off your Delete Me plan by texting Vince20 to 64,000. The only way to get 20% off is to text Vince20 to 64,000. That's Vince20 to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. All right, Joe Biden. Joe frickin' Biden. What is going on with this guy? So we get, going into the weekend, we get some audio of Joe Biden. It's the conversation between Robert Hur and Joe. And this is, remember, this whole transcript was already released. We knew every last detail of this conversation. We just hadn't heard the audio of it. And the Biden administration fought to keep the audio from coming out because they knew that the audio would only compound the electoral problems for Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris. They knew that. So they kept it from you. This was not a transparent administration. It was a sensorial administration that kept information from you. And so now it finally comes out because the Trump administration is in place. My colleague at the Daily Caller, Reagan Reese, has been asking the White House relentlessly, will there be the Robert Hur audio? Will we get to hear it? And so on Friday, we do. It gets released to Axios' Alex Thompson, who just, of course, co-wrote that book with Jake Tapper, where they alleged that, not just allege, but finally admit that Joe Biden's mind wasn't working while he was president of the United States. And the ensuing audio comes to us. And here it is, cut one, audio of Biden struggling to answer even basic questions about his theft of classified documents. Listen.
Where did you keep papers that related to those things that you were actively working on?
Well, I don't know. This is what, 2017, 18, that area?
Yes, sir.
Remember, in this time frame, my son is either been deployed or is dying. And so it was.
He's all over the place.
What was happening though? What month did Bo die? God, May 30th. 2015. Was it 2015 he died? 2015. I think it's 2015.
Remember, Joe is bringing up Bo and his death. Robert Hur did not do that.
And what's happened in the meantime is that and Trump gets elected in November of 2017? 2016. All right.
He's completely lost. Completely lost. Now, there's two things. There's two big takeaways from that audio. One, Joe Biden's brain does not work. And it is crystal clear at the time of that conversation and well before that he's in no position to be president of the United States. Two, Miranda Devine's been focused on this, the great Miranda Devine. In the full audio, including the audio you just heard, remember, although his brain is going, he's also attempting to summon the kind of deception necessary to justify why he stole huge categories of classified information. And we're keeping them in Delaware, in the garage, next to the Corvette, at the Biden Center, all over the place, keeping classified information he had no right to have, stolen from the federal government. So here he is trying to both obfuscate and having a limited capacity to do it. Now, remember, when Robert Hur released his report, he said Biden is a sympathetic old man with a poor memory, and so therefore I can't prosecute him. You know, no trial, no jury's going to find him guilty because he's such a sad sack. That was basically the summary from Robert Hur. And now the audio comes out, and I'm seeing a bunch of lefties finally admitting or claiming what Robert Hur claims. Look, I still think Robert Hur rigged the whole thing because the guy clearly violated the law. It's not just because you're a sympathetic elderly man with a poor memory doesn't mean the facts can't be dictated against you, which of course they could in Biden's case. We had the photographic evidence. Of course, they didn't spread the classified documents across the hood of the car. That's the way they would have done it with Trump, of course. And Trump was in a very different situation. Did not steal classified documents, not like Biden. But that's what we had going into the weekend. And then Sunday, all of a sudden, just ahead of Monday's news cycle, Biden World releases information saying that Joe Biden has aggressive cancer. Suddenly last night. Former President Joe Biden just received a diagnosis of prostate cancer on Friday, according to a Sunday announcement by his personal office. Quote, last week, President Joe Biden was seen for a new finding of a prostate nodule after experiencing increasing urinary symptoms. On Friday, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer, characterized by a Gleason score of 9, grade group 5, with metastasis to the bone, the statement reads. While this represents a more aggressive form of the disease, the cancer appears to be hormone sensitive, which allows for effective management. The president and his family are reviewing treatment options with his physicians. So wait a second. He's got stage 4 prostate cancer? It's metastasized to his bones? What just happened? All of a sudden? Just like that? Now, doctors are not buying it. Doctors are not buying it. There was a doctor who was just on News Nation last night. He's a urologist, cut 4. Take a look at this, who says, none of this adds up. Biden was seen by a doctor all the time. He was the president of the United States. He has an entire medical team that hovers over him. Take a look at this, cut 4.
It's very unlikely that someone could get annual checkups and not notice a PSA elevation over the past, But this is what I typically would see in a VA hospital, where a patient hasn't had medical attention in 10 years, presents to an emergency room with bone pain, and then they find that it's metastatic prostate cancer. But in the modern age of medicine, especially the fact that he was a former president, he had intensive, state of the art, care where we can see prostate cancer, 10 years in the past. So this is, it's very unusual to hear that someone has prostate cancer where they're annually being followed up. And the fact that we just find it at a Gleason 9 is just pretty much unheard of in this day and age of medicine.
It's unheard of. It's unheard of. Normal people spot this with normal medical attention. President Biden had unusual medical attention. One quick note on this PSA reading to examine whether or not he's got problems with his prostate. Every other president this century has had his prostate examined and PSA levels read out to the public to let you know the status of their prostate health. That's normal for an older man to have that examination done, given that is one of the leading illnesses that older men come down with. And Joe Biden's doctor never revealed any of that. Joe Biden's doctor actually never appeared in front of the press. They would just release glowing reports each year about how wonderfully he was doing. And they didn't disclose any of this. So a couple of really big questions right out the gate, and then we'll bring our guest in on this subject and more. One, where are the visitor logs for Delaware? The president was going to Delaware every weekend. What was he doing there? Two, where is Kevin O'Connor, President Biden's doctor? President Biden's doctor was not merely his doctor. He was also a personal business partner of the Biden family. He had negotiated at one point going into deeper business with Jim Biden. What lies are being told here? Here's another. Does the Trump White House have access to medical records for the past president of the United States that it can, within the confines of the law, disclose to the public about what they knew? None of this was disclosed. All of a sudden, now it's coming out? Nobody can believe that. Doctors can't believe that. Doctors are stunned. Oncologists, urologists are stunned by this news. It grew so quickly, that aggressively. It doesn't add up. There's a lot to unpack here, but I think the contours of the scandal involving Joe Biden are just now coming into full relief. More in a moment as we bring in Mike McCormick. We'll do that here in just a moment. I first want to thank our sponsors. Did you know that Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the United States? With thousands of different plants and over 2 million happy customers, they've got all the plants your yard needs, like fruit trees, privacy trees, flowering trees, shrubs, and so much more. Whatever plants you are interested in, Fast Growing Trees has you covered. You can order online, get your plants delivered directly to your door in just a few days. Their Alive and Thrive guarantee ensures that your plants arrive happy and healthy. Plus, get support from trained plant experts on call to help you plan your landscape. This spring, they've got the best deals for your yard, up to half off on select plants and other deals. Do what I did. Go with Fast Growing Trees. It'll make your yard beautiful. And listeners to this show get 15% off their first purchase when using the code VINCE at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code VINCE at checkout. Now is absolutely the perfect time to plant. Offer is valid now for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. Go to fastgrowingtrees.com for details. Please do. It's a great place. And a great drink is Blackout Coffee. I drink Blackout Coffee every single day. I love my Blackout Coffee. Blackout Coffee is a great sponsor of this program. John is a great American patriot. He supports you. He supports me. He supports this program. And for that, we're so grateful. And he supports our country, most importantly. He built Blackout Coffee from the ground up. He refuses to compromise on quality or values. It's America First coffee, roasted fresh, right here in the United States. There's no woke nonsense, just bold, strong coffee for people who actually get stuff done. And if that's you, you know who you are. As you know, Blackout Coffee has been the official coffee of all of us here at Silverlock, so you do know that this is a brand that stands for the right values. And here's the key. It's delicious. Delicious coffee. I drink it black, so I know. Blackout Coffee. Here's the deal for you. John is hooking you up. Head over to blackoutcoffee.com/Vince. Use the code Vince. That's VINCE. And you're going to get 20% off your first order. So whether you like whole bean, ground, or even instant coffee that doesn't suck, Blackout Coffee has you covered. Support a company that actually shares your values. Blackoutcoffee.com/Vince. Use the code Vince and get 20% off your first order. Blackout Coffee. All right. All right. So we get the information about Biden. A couple of things. You get the Robert Hur conversation finally is released because, the Trump administration is transparent, so they'll release it. They did on Friday. And then we get this news that Biden has cancer, which certainly seems like a big distraction effort to make him seem more sympathetic right now in the midst of all of the lies we were told about his health. But honestly, at the moment, it just looks like we're being exposed to more lies about his health. Let's dive in a little deeper with my guest, Mike McCormick, who joins us in the house now. Mike was a stenographer for Joe Biden when he was vice president of the United States. Mike, you traveled the world with Joe, so you got to see him up close and personal. And you've got your great Substack. The Substack, remind us?
Midnight in the Laptop of Good and Evil.
Midnight in the Laptop of Good and Evil. So you kind of know where Mike's coming from. You can tell by the title. Good to see you, Mike.
Good to see you.
Great to have you here, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What do you make of this news that Biden is suddenly revealing that he has cancer?
I worked with Doc O'Connor. When I worked for Joe Biden, I traveled with him.
Yeah.
Don't have a lot of confidence in his truth-telling.
Why?
Well, first of all, they hid what Joe Biden was
Yes.
as he was getting ready to be president in 2020. Doc O'Connor was his doc all through the White House years. So, I was on Fox News in September of 2020 saying Joe Biden doesn't have the physical capacity to be the president. He doesn't have the mental capacity. He's slowing down.
You could see that.
I could see that
As a
then.
stenographer, as a layman, somebody who was close to him, you're just looking at, wait a minute, this guy does not have what it takes.
Right. So then they put together this fake pandemic. They hid him in the basement. They put together a fake election. They stole the election, in my opinion. I've written books on it. You know that.
Yeah.
And so then he gets into the presidency. So here's something that I know from right as soon as he got into the White House. Every president gets a chance to get in front of the Super Bowl audience to do a Super Bowl interview.
Yeah.
So in 2021, Joe Biden's fresh into the White House. He gets on CBS to do an interview with Norah O'Donnell. She promotes it. We're going to do a 20-minute interview with Joe Biden. It was only 12 minutes long. So they already had to cover for him. That's CBS covering for him. So they knew, the media knew, the White House doctors knew. I personally think, my stance on where Joe Biden is with his health, I hope for the best possible outcome for him.
Of course.
I think he should recover and then confess his crimes.
Amen. So I've seen a lot of the social media reaction right away. People are like, "Oh, give him some time. Don't criticize him. Let the family deal with this." David Axelrod was on television yesterday, immediately saying that what needs to happen here is all of the concern about his mental state needs to be muted right now while people are concerned about his health. And I'm just saying that's garbage. Look, what you said is right. Obviously, you don't want to see anybody suffer. It doesn't matter their station in life, but I'm telling you, if every other detail about this guy's life has been a lie, which of course it has been,
right?
Why wouldn't we assume that there's a lot of dishonesty that has led up to the announcement we heard yesterday?
That's right. And so I went back and I looked at the transcript of the interview, her interview. I didn't listen to the audio. I looked at the transcript because I'm a transcript guy. I did that for Joe. So the transcript had some really interesting revelations to me. That Joe Biden, to me right now, this story that Axelrod is promoting, this health, we'll call it a health scare, is a cover story for the cover story.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Her interview was a cover story. I mean, he starts the interview off and he says, I'm just here to write a report. So he's a special counsel. That's all a special counsel does. They just write a report and turn it over to Merrick Garland, who makes a decision whether or not to prosecute anything they see in there.
Wait, Herr said at the beginning of the transcript that he was just there to write a report?
Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah.
So he told Joe up front that there will be no prosecutions that come from this?
No, he goes, we're here to write a report. That's his sort of opening introductory statement.
Yes.
We're interviewing you here to write a report.
But Herr said in his report that the reason that he wasn't recommending charges is because Joe Biden demonstrated in that interview that he was an elderly, sympathetic man with a poor memory.
Right.
So what you're describing, I just want to notate for a moment. What you're describing is that Herr is being duplicitous because Herr walks into the room and says, we're just writing a report, instantly giving away the game, and then would later use the conversation as a, quote, justification not to charge him.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what I read. That's what I read in the transcript.
Okay. Yeah.
So keeping on with the transcript. Transcripts, when you do an interview for a transcript, usually there's about 1 minute of speaking at normal pace to a page of transcription.
Yes.
Joe Biden was speaking at a normal pace. He wasn't wandering. He wasn't lost. It pretty much tracked with how he spoke. And from reading the transcript, I could see things in there where he was asked a question and he would come right back with a direct answer. Yeah. Like he wasn't fumbling for words. The little portion that you played, that audio portion, to me it was kind of like one of those mafia dons who all of a sudden pretends when he's in court that he's like fumbling and he's old and he can't really be trying to get the jury to be sympathetic. That's what I took that as.
Yes.
And they cut that little piece out to make that audio what everybody heard.
This gets to what I was saying about Miranda Devine a moment ago. He was leaning into the frailty routine in order to evade the obvious thing, which is he stole classified information.
Yeah. And there's more in there. So one of the things that they asked him that was really interesting to me was they asked him about, there's this classification you have on all these files for eyes only. It's
right.
Eyes only. That's not something that they needed to find out about. It doesn't relate directly to their crime they were investigating. They were investigating whether it was he had top secret clearance files or classified files. But they had a whole bunch of files that were eyes only. So they asked him, what's this mean? And he goes, oh, those are the files that I have from my group that we discuss amongst ourselves to keep away from Biden and his group. That would be Axelrod. That's why Axelrod is coming out and saying this stuff. So in other words, Joe Biden and his group, his inner circle, were doing stuff within the White House, eyes only. They didn't want Obama
to keep from Obama. Okay.
To keep from Obama and his guys.
Yeah.
Because they had stuff they had to do.
Yeah, but there's also, okay. I mean, there's not supposed to be any such category of classification that the president's not allowed to see it.
Right. But it's in his files, and they're all of a sudden looking at his files, and there's this eyes only. What is this stuff? Why has he got eyes only? And it was a really interesting comment from him. And he's like, yeah, that's just us talking amongst ourselves because we have stuff that we talk amongst ourselves that we have to argue against Joe Biden. I mean, argue against Obama.
Yes. Yeah, okay. All right. So in terms of like the Biden that you got to see, are you surprised at all by this news, the way it rolled out this weekend?
No. I mean, this is Hallmark Biden world. The sympathetic stuff, playing for the sympathies. I mean, that's what was in that clip, right?
Yeah.
He gets pushed a little bit, and I think they were asking him about the Biden Penn Center.
Yep.
They were specifically asking about that. So then he goes into this, oh yeah, Bo, and he gets into this sort of sympathy mode. That's what his operation's been all along.
So
going back 50 years.
We saw Joe Biden pushed out in front of a couple of interviews a week or two ago where he does The View. First he did the BBC interview, and then he did The View. And the reason that he's doing these interviews appears to be that they're trying to salvage the Biden family's reputation because the income has dried up. Mark Halperin was saying that all of their income sources are collapsing because he doesn't have the levers of power anymore. Nobody's buying the macaroni art from Hunter Biden.
Right.
So they need to figure out a way out of this. So if you use that as a rubric for understanding everything that we're witnessing, it kind of makes sense right now that they're trying to get past the Biden's brain doesn't work saga by introducing the, oh, Biden has cancer, how dare you talk about his health in a critical way.
Right.
Saga.
So that's where we are. So there was a couple other things that came through this transcript that I read. One was he went into very great detail about a case that he worked on when he was first a lawyer back in Wilmington in the early 60s, like 66 or 67, something like that. He was elected to the Senate in 1972. So it was around 68, maybe.
Yeah.
He was a lawyer. And he talked about this in like amazing detail. And the thing is, all through the interview he has, they ask him, what about these files? I don't know about that. My staff knows about that. Did you have anything to do with this? No, I didn't have anything. The staff just did it. So he always put everything on his staff. But this chunk of information comes from a time before he ever had staff. And he nailed it. I mean, the details that he had on so this basically the story is he was a lawyer for a company that was defending DuPont in an industrial accident. The guy who was injured got so badly injured, Joe Biden felt guilty, walked across the street and became public defender. And that's when his whole life shifted into this do-good guy. Well, he goes into the details of this industrial accident, and I was reading going like, because he's spoken about this in the past that I've heard in speeches.
Yes.
And I was like, this guy is digging up details from his past with no problem.
Wait, is this the industrial accident where the guy accidentally burned his junk off?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That does appear in the transcript. I remember that. That was one of the wilder moments.
Yeah.
And also, again, what does this have to do with whether or not you stole classified documents?
Right.
Biden is telling stories about a dude who burned his junk off as a way to filibuster and charm the investigators.
I was a good guy.
Yeah.
I was really helping. So that's typical Biden. The other thing he gets into was there was a photo I think there was a photo they were looking at of him with a bow and arrow. And he talks about this trip he took to Mongolia. And I was on that trip with him. And I remember the trip. Well, he started going into details about the trip it jogged my memory. So he really had a control of the facts, both from long ago and from his vice presidency as he's sitting down. The interviews took place on October 8th and 9th, 2023.
Yeah.
So at that point, he thinks he's going to be president in a year, right? He thinks, I just got to get through this interview. I just got to flush my way through it, and I'll get...
Well, and also the only reason the Biden administration even entertained this was because they were doing a box-checking exercise to pretend like they were more responsible than Trump.
Right.
The whole reason they did the Robert Hur thing was to try and use it as a weapon against Trump. Look at me. Look how responsible I am. I'm working with the special counsel. Any problems that we might have, we're resolving. It was meant to be a theatrical stunt, and in the end, it blew up in his face.
Right. So there was one more really significant thing that I saw in this transcript. He talks about this big letter that he wrote to Obama on Thanksgiving night, 2009. He sits down and handwrites this letter. And there was some usage of classified documents as he's compiling this letter. Well, one of the things that he wrote in the letter, and they asked him, and he said this, they didn't ask him to talk about the classified stuff that he had in the letter. He exposed the classified stuff they had in the letter. He said, yeah, I was writing to Obama because I was the foreign policy expert, and Obama was new, and he needed me to sort of back him up. He said, we were talking about Afghanistan, and I told him, we have to ask questions about what do we do when we kill Osama bin Laden in Pakistan, and what do we do when the Taliban takes over, and how are we going to continue to train? He was talking about McChrystal because he was over there with General Stanley McChrystal.
Yeah.
This is 2009 that he's writing this. They didn't know officially that Osama bin Laden was in Pakistan. They officially didn't know. But in this thing, he writes, Osama bin Laden, what do we do when we kill Osama bin Laden in Pakistan? It wasn't Iran. He didn't use Iran. He specifically used Pakistan. And it jumped out at me because in 2005, I went to Pakistan with Cheney, and we took a helo trip right over Abbottabad.
Yes.
Where Osama bin Laden was killed.
Yes.
And so I think what happened was the U.S. had Osama bin Laden on ice, stashed in Abbottabad, and Cheney and Bush had set it up with the Pakistanis, and then Biden took it over. I have some documents that I can show you.
It's crazy. I mean, the reality, of course, for that war is that the United States was funding both sides of it. We were sending money through Pakistan, and then it went to Al-Qaeda, and then it was being used against Americans.
Right.
It is disgraceful.
Right.
What took place there.
So there's a couple. This is why it jumped out at me. So I did this trip with him. This is one of the pieces from the press thing. So that's the helo tour that we took with Cheney, and we fly from an airport, Chalakala Airport, up into this area where the USAID is funding earthquake relief. Well, along the way is Abbottabad. It's right about there.
Yeah.
You can see it. So he flew right over the top of Abbottabad. Dick Cheney and press. The press on the trip was ABC, Terry Moran, who just got manhandled by Trump in the White House.
Yeah.
The AP, Fox News, James Rosen was on the trip, and Dana Bash was on the trip with CNN.
Yes.
In this transcript that Biden's talking about, so this is 2009, he's writing this letter, and in 2023, he's telling them about this transcript. He talks about Panetta. Leon Panetta was the guy who had to he's conversing. He's going back and forth with Panetta at this time. Panetta was in charge of the CIA. Panetta's chief of staff was Dana Bash's ex-husband.
Yes, Jeremy
Bash.
Yes.
So in 2005, when Dana Bash is on this trip, she's flying over Abbottabad. She lands in this area, and she goes an interview with Cheney, and she goes, "We hear that Osama bin Laden is in other parts of Afghanistan. Do you know where he is?" And Cheney goes, "Dana, I can't answer your question." And this is in a White House transcript that I did. That was on that trip. And he goes, "Dana, I can't answer your question." And she goes, Do you know where he is? He's like, "No, I can't answer your question. I can neither confirm nor deny."
Right.
But at the time, her husband, who then becomes a chief of staff of the CIA,
yes,
I think gave her information. You're going to go to Abbottabad, and this is why you're going there, because they have Osama bin Laden on ice. I've looked into CIA websites.
Man, this is huge.
Yeah. CIA websites.
Yeah.
And I've taken screenshots. I put it on my Substack. Screenshots of CIA surveillance photos of Abbottabad from 2004 and 2005. So this trip is December 2005.
Can you imagine?
So they knew the whole time.
The idea that the guy we've been hunting and that all those lives were lost, would be known by the United States to be there for that long. That another epic scandal. If that's all true, another epic scandal that Joe Biden was directly involved in.
Right.
You're keeping updates on that story and more on your excellent Substack. Again, Midnight in the Laptop.
In the Laptop of Good and Evil.
Midnight in the Laptop of Good and Evil. Mike McCormick. Hey, thanks for stopping by today.
Thanks for having me.
Really good to see you here. The great Mike McCormick. Great guest. And just imagine, being a guy like Mike and working all those years alongside Joe Biden, getting to see him front and center, and then transcribing his every word. Every time I see Mike, I joke about that. I can't even believe you had to write down every syllable that came out of that guy's mouth. Remarkable. Hey, before we go today, I want to make sure to hit some of the other big things that are happening in the news, some of the craziness that's out there. Tim Walz, remember him, Tampon Tim Walz? He is, instead of supporting American law enforcement, the left is attacking ICE agents again. Here's Tim Walz calling immigration and customs enforcement agents who are making these deportations around the country, in his words, the Gestapo. Take a look, cut 13. Here's Tim.
Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets. They're in unmarked vans, wearing masks, being shipped off to foreign torture dungeons. No chance to mount a defense, not even a chance to kiss a loved one goodbye, just grabbed up by masked agents, shoved into those vans, and disappeared. To be clear, there's no way for us to know whether they were actually criminals or not, because they refused to give them a trial.
That's disgraceful. That's disgraceful. That's a commencement speech that he was, for some reason, asked to give. And he goes and he attacks law enforcement. Stands up for illegal alien rapists and murderers and attacks law enforcement. Calls them he meant to say Gestapo. but he called them the Gestapo. That guy's a scumbag. Thank God that he never became vice president of the United States. What a weirdo that dude is. And so there's Tim Walz. And so there was a reaction to this. The Department of Homeland Security posted a statement in reaction to Tim Walz's stupidity this weekend, saying, quote, "It is absolutely sickening to compare ICE law enforcement agents to the Gestapo. Attacks and demonization of ICE and our partners is wrong. ICE officers are now facing a 413% increase in assaults. Our message is clear. Do not come to this country illegally. If you do, we will arrest you, deport you, and you will never return." I want to emphasize something. First of all, for the ICE agents and the families of the ICE agents, thank you. Thank you for doing your job. Thank you for being out there for us. Thank you for securing our country. Thank you for protecting our sovereignty and our communities. Thank you. These ICE officers were handcuffed during the Biden era. They weren't allowed to do their jobs. The left actively worked against them, both within the administration and in these sanctuary cities and states across the country. Now, thanks to the president, they're once again able to do that job, and it's a dangerous one. For DHS to relay that these ICE officers are now facing a 413% increase in assaults, not a small thing. The left, like they've done with President Trump and the people who work for him directly, they're now doing it to ICE agents as well, and they have been for years. The left has a special animosity for immigration enforcement. They've put a target on the backs of ICE officers. They've treated them like garbage, left an impression in the eyes of the crazy left-wing base that ICE officers are deserving of contempt, scorn, and attack. And so now you've seen a 413% increase in attacks on ICE officers. So all the more reason I say thank you. Thank you to the guys who are actually trying to protect our country right now and getting around the country to deport these vile people from they shouldn't be here. They shouldn't be here. And they deserve our support, not our contempt. What you heard from Tampon Tim Walz a moment ago. Also, speaking of immigration, Hillary Clinton also was on a stage this past weekend, and she was mocking the idea that Americans need to have more children. She said that this is why we have immigrants. Take a look. Cut 14, Hillary Clinton.
The most children in our country are immigrants, and they want to deport them. So none of this adds up. But, one of the reasons why our economy did so much better than comparable advanced economies across the world is because we actually had a replenishment, because we had a lot of immigrants legally and undocumented who had a larger than normal by American standards family. So this is just another one of their make America great again by returning to the lifestyles and the economic arrangements of not just the 1950s. I mean, let's keep going back as far as we can and see what happens.
What an elitist witch she is. So her preferred society is one where she craps all over Americans. She just sees everyone as someone who works for her in the end. She doesn't care that you have illegal aliens who are being exploited for ungodly low wages at the expense of both them and American workers. She's perfectly happy with the status quo of that system. Perfectly happy. And there she is defending it. You know who sucks? Americans. They don't even make babies. We need to bring in people, both, you heard her say, legally and undocumented. Well, what's the opposite of legally? It's not undocumented. The opposite of undocumented would be documented. So what are you even talking about? She said legally and undocumented. No, legally and illegally coming into the United States. And not only, this is classic lefty nonsense. Not only is she saying that it's totally fine that illegals are coming into the country, now she's admitting that. She's saying it's better. Why is it better? They're better than Americans. They have children. We get workers out of them. At least they're giving us something, unlike those horrible Americans. My God, I am so grateful that she lost and that it was President Trump who beat her. All right. I've got a lot more to say. I'm going to say a lot more of it today on the national radio show, 12 to 3 Eastern time. You can watch that on rumble.com/Vince. Or go to thevinceshow.com. We've got your local listings for your radio stations up there. I'll be back with you tomorrow on this show. Vince, I hope you have a great day. Up next, Steven Crowder.